I'm thankful for a couple extra seconds at the end of that. Welcome back from lunch. I'm going to tell you a story. I know a guy, his name is Dennis. I call him Crazy Old Dennis. Dennis is a guy who lives in downtown Raleigh, and I have the pleasure of hanging out with some ladies who take some food and some essential items to downtown Raleigh on Saturday mornings. And Dennis is one of the guys who often shows up. Now, when he shows up, he's usually last, because Dennis is an elderly gentleman. He has a bad hip, and he will walk downtown with whatever he happens to find that's in any kind of a shape that resembles a cane. So his favorite is a broken golf club. And Dennis walks down, and I call him Crazy Old Dennis, but it's really just endearing because he's so much fun. He sometimes brings a boombox. I don't know where he gets a boombox or how he has batteries, but he does. And he brings it down, and he turns it on as loud as he can, and while he eats, he sings with his eyes closed. And then sometimes he's got a phone in his pocket. I don't know where he gets a phone, but he has one, and he's playing the news as loud as he can. And he's got his eyes closed for that, too. And he tells us stories about women that he's loved and places that he's been and jobs he's going to get. And sometimes he pulls out some mail that he's gotten. I don't know where he gets mail, but he has mail, and he'll have us read it to him because he can't read. It'll often be an application for an apartment that he'll have us look at, and he has just things he wants to do. He smells a little bit like beer all the time. But he's great, and I love him. But I have this thought when a couple of weeks goes by, and here he comes again with a fishing pole or a golf club or whatever was the right shape to hold him up. I wonder if I had asked Dennis's parents 70 years ago, that question I asked you guys. Hey, when you think about Dennis 30 years from now, where's he going to be? I really don't think they would have said, downtown Raleigh, carrying a broken golf club, smelling a little like beer, and jamming to a boombox. I don't think that's what they would have said. And I think to myself, how does this happen? How do I prevent this from happening? First of all, for my own kids, but how do we get ahead of this? What would have happened if I could have gotten here before? And the answer is, well, maybe nothing, but maybe something. And a lot of us, we're definitely here before that. Well, at least I hope so. I haven't seen anybody who looks like you're old enough to be Dennis's dad in the audience. But we're here before, and here's something that I want you to know. We have the ability to be able to do a little bit of work that would keep us from being able to get there. So I want you to picture a scale, like this kind, the kind that, you put something on one side and it goes up or down. I wanted to have one here today, but those suckers are real hard to find. I ordered one, and it's this big, so use your imagination. So I want you to picture a scale, and your kid is a scale, all right? And the things that happen to us in life, they're either negative or they're positive, and the scale is always kind of going like this. Well, smarter people than me will tell you that there's one side of the scale where it's all the negative things. Oftentimes, these are called ACEs. They stand for adverse childhood experiences. You add some things like some trauma, some poverty, some things that you really don't want to be a part of your kid's life to that side. plus some life experiences, maybe some choices that they make as they get older that sort of weigh that side down. Now it's going like this. But then remember, I reminded you, we have you, right? You have influence. We put you on the other side. You're called an asset. An asset is a thing that contributes positively to a child's development, contributes positively to their self-worth and them understanding who they are. And so what you want to do is you want to add weight to that other side. That is not an excuse to continue eating Girl Scout cookies. We're talking about things besides just you. So you want to add things to that other side. Now, the greatest two buckets of things, if we can call them buckets, that tend to add weight to that other side are positive environments and positive character traits. And here's the beauty of that. Those things that happen on that other side, oftentimes the negative side, they're often outside of our control. But the positive things, like you continuing to show up, we have a little bit of control over that. Because positive environments and positive character traits are things that are cultivated. That means people can make them happen, people like you. So that's mostly encouraging, right? Unless you feel like you're pretty far out from before. Or whatever it is that's going on in your life, you know, as you're sitting here right now, kind of has that negative side a little stacked. And maybe the positive side only has a little bit on it. Maybe you're parenting a young adult who they've left your home and they're making decisions that you know you worked really hard to prevent them from making, and you have no say-so in that. Maybe you were scrolling through your teens' texts, which I don't care how you feel about that. I support that. Maybe you were scrolling through your teens' texts and you found out that way that your teenage daughter, who you felt like was pretty even-keeled and level-headed, is thinking about hurting herself. Starts to tip the scale. Or maybe your situation is a little like this one.
Well, I'm just going to be honest. Being a single parent is hard. It is hard. It, once upon a time, was very financially hard. So I can relate 100% to the financial struggles that come with being a single parent. I've shared this story with some, and I don't mind sharing it now, but there was a time, even though I was with their father at this point, financially I was a single parent. I have financially been a single parent the whole time, for the most part. I had to steal formula to be able to feed Jordan. He was a premature baby, and he had to have a special formula, and it was super expensive. And I didn't have the money for it, and I did that. So it's tough. You have to make decisions as a single parent sometimes that you feel like you have to compromise maybe who you are, what's right and what's wrong. Outside of financially, it is isolating at times. In previous churches I went to, I've never felt this way at Hope, but at previous churches I kind of felt like an outsider because it was me and my kids. It wasn't a husband and a wife and children. It didn't seem like there was many options for me as far as programs within the church and groups within the church that I felt comfortable in. But once I got that village and started getting a little bit more comfortable going to Hope and getting to know people. I've definitely met some people and found some groups that have made me not feel so isolated. I would say the biggest struggle as a single parent is I don't have these issues too much now, like because I have the village and a great group of friends, but there were many times where I needed another body. I needed another person, another adult, a responsible, trustworthy body person. And I just didn't have that. And I felt like I was shorting one part of my life to fill another part. And sometimes I felt like I had to make the choice. Do I not show up for this performance at school or this meeting at school or, he's getting an award today, but I have a meeting at work, so it was just tough because I couldn't be in all of the places at one time.
That's my friend Hope, by the way. She's a phenomenal mom. What if you're a single parent and you're trying to make ends meet and you get home and all you have time for is homework, making a meal, tucking kids in, and that's your life. And the next day it starts over. What if your family is impacted by having a child in it with special needs? And you feel as though no one's ever going to be able to understand where you're coming from. And the things that other people are phasing out of, you're staying stuck in. Or what if you're a dad and everyone tells you that you're supposed to be strong and you're supposed to be the leader? And in a church context, sometimes they tell you you're supposed to be the spiritual leader, and you're not exactly sure what that means, but you definitely feel like it's a little bit risky to ask. And then you find out that your 12-year-old son has started cutting. That's not something boys typically do, but yours is. And he's becoming aggressive. And you think, I'm supposed to be the one to handle this. I don't even know what to do. And so you just go numb because you're not sure who to ask. All of those are real stories of parents who are perhaps in this room right now. They're friends of mine. Here's what I know. And this is why I have hope, in spite of those stories, in spite of those things. And I know you probably have one that popped in your brain, and maybe it's your own, and it's the reason why you came here today. The reason why I have hope is because last week I was asked a question by another single mom, and she said, hey, if I come to that conference next weekend, is there going to be anything for single moms? And this is what I knew about my church and about my friends who are in the room. If you had known Hope Ritter some 15 years ago, and she had told you that she didn't have enough money to buy formula for her child, and she was going to have to steal it, raise your hand if you would have bought her a can of formula. I know you would have, because those are the kind of people that you are. In that passage that Chase read this morning from Deuteronomy, one of the most famous, impactful parenting passages in the Bible, it begins with Moses as he addresses the crowd saying, "Hear, O Israel." He's not just talking to the parents, he's talking to the entire nation. The entire nation is going to rally around these families and these kids because it's not just for the parents to do. It's their privilege to get to, but as my friend Shantae often says, they're all our kids. So if you are the primary adult, and we've been telling you that all day long, and you're actually feeling maybe a little bit of like, oh, that's so much pressure, let me tell you this, it's not just for you to do. You are the primary, but you're not the only. What if there were more? And a question I love to ask people is, what if there were 5? What if you were just one of a team of 5? What would that look like? Well, I was an English major, but I know that 2 is better than 1, and 4 is better than 3. I can get that far. But some of you type A parents in the room, you're starting to count off the people right now, and you're like, we live kind of far out, we're not really near family, or virtual school, I don't know who else I would have. Well, let me help you. Turn to page 11 in your conference book. I don't like homework, I'm not going to send you home with any. We're going to do this right now. Here's how you do this. Very practical, but you have to be the one to do it. The very first thing that you have to do as you work towards building a team of 5 in your kid's life, and I'm sticking with that number because I think it's something we all can aspire to, and maybe it's just a tiny bit out of our reach, but I think if you're like me, I will go after something that's a little bit harder rather than something that's just super easy. So let's go for 5. The first thing you have to do is you have to take an inventory. Now, the reason why I call it an inventory is because whether you've chosen to have those people in your kid's life or not, they're already there. By sheer quantity time, they're there. You're there with them a lot of the time, which is why you're primary. But if they're going to school right now, they're spending a large amount of time with a teacher, probably, maybe more than one. Those people get some hours in their day. If they're on a team, they have coaches. If they go to karate, they have a sensei? Is that right? Clearly my kids don't do karate. They have some kinds of instructors. They have aunts, they have uncles. Maybe they have a nanny. Maybe they have a babysitter you often use. Hopefully you have grandparents around. That's usually a blessing. I say usually. But those people are involved in your kid's life right now. So what I want you to do is I want you to take an inventory. I want you to write down their names. Take a moment, grab a pen, and write down a few names that come to mind. There's no background music, so I won't let this awkwardness go on too long. How's a band director or a band drum major? I got to do that in a long time. That list that you made, maybe you didn't finish it quite yet. You get to take the book with you. Look at it. How comfortable do you feel with who's on that list? Is it light? Are there a lot of great people on the list? Are there people on the list who you don't really know that much about? When this first started occurring to me, I read it in a book. Again, I read a lot of books of people who are smarter than me. And it struck me that this was a super valuable tool. And when I started to do this same inventory myself, at the time, my youngest was in 3rd grade. And I thought, my son gets a lot of time each day with Mr. Daniel. It was a crunchy school. They called them by their first names. Mr. Daniel. He is with Mr. Daniel from 8-ish in the morning until 3:30-ish in the afternoon. Because the school didn't have a cafeteria, they ate lunch together in the classroom. And because my son loves soccer and this teacher loves soccer, this teacher plays soccer on the playground with the kids. How much cooler can that guy get? I don't know anything about him. I am sure that my kid is enthralled with who this guy is. And I also know that in 3rd grade's a hard year for kids. If you've got a 3rd grader, you know this. 3rd grade is hard. There's a lot of empathy being developed and self-worth stuff happening, and I could see that he was struggling with confidence, even in 3rd grade. And it was impacting his behavior. What can't be talked out gets acted out. So I thought, I want to understand the influence of this man and how much maybe we could work together. And so I went and I got to know him. And sure enough, there were a few things that were different about what we believed. Maybe our faith was a little different, but overall, this is a really solid guy. And so that led me into, I'm using him as an example, this next step. Invite. Once you've done an inventory and you see how light or how heavy that list of people is, and you feel pretty confident about who you know is there might be some people there who you don't have a say-so over. I didn't have a say-so over Mr. Daniel being on my son's scale. But if there's somebody there that you don't like being there, maybe you can stack the other side. So when you look around and you look at your life and you think, who are the people whose values represent our family values? Who are the people who they also would do a great job at pointing my kid to Christ? Who are the people who their marriage represents what I think a marriage should look like, or their parenting represents what my parenting looks like on its best moment? Who are those people who could speak life into my child? And now you take the intentional step of inviting them. Now I know that sounds awkward, but I've done this. It's only awkward for 0.2 seconds, and then it's meaningful. When you tell somebody else, hey, I'm trying to build a team of people around my kid because I want them to know their worth, and I want them to know how valuable they are, and when I try to think through 4 other people besides myself or 3 other people, you came to mind. I promise you, nobody will laugh at you. And if your kid gets a little bit older, I encourage you to have this conversation with them. Ask them, who are the people that if you couldn't talk to me, you could go to them and you could talk to them, or you would feel safe to ask them a question, or if you had done something that you just felt like you might not want to tell me first, who would you tell? It's an interesting question. It's a good question for you to ask your teenagers. When you go to those people and you say to them, hey, I asked my kid, and my kid said you, that's huge. I promise you that. So I had this conversation with Mr. Daniel, this man that I barely knew at a parent-teacher conference. At the end, I'm like, hey, I got to tell you something. And he cried. I wasn't expecting that. Then we both cried because I cry a lot. But from that point on, Mr. Daniel was on my team. He would reach out to me and tell me what was going on at school, strategies that he had tried. I would tell him, hey, this is happening at home. And Mr. Daniel wasn't a believer, but he was contributing towards my child's self-worth. And so that made it to where when he came home, and I had small group leaders who were contributing, and they were also in the 5, and they were trying to tell him that he's valuable, and God says that he's valuable, he's far more likely to believe it because he's surrounded by people who are telling him that exact same thing. So you'll need to invite those people in. You can do that creatively or just call them on the phone. Now, I have ideas for creatively, by the way, if you want to hang out after this. The next thing that you need to do is once you've invited them, you need to involve them. You can't just say, hey, you're really special, and see ya. You got to tell them, okay, what do we do now? So invite them, tell them their sports schedules, invite them to dance recitals, invite them to dinner at your house. We've had some of the most meaningful conversations with some of my kids' 5 at our table. Involve them in your kid's life. Let them know when they're having a hard day. Maybe this is somebody who you just need them on your side because you know that when they pray, their prayers get answered. Ask them to pray for your kids. Reach out to them and say, like, hey, my son's got a test today, and it just seems like it's really giving him a hard time. He's having a hard time. When you do that around here with a student pastor, they'll send your kid a funny meme. Now the secret is out for my son who's in the back of the room. Once you've done that and you've inventoried and you've invited and you've involved, you got to repeat that process over and over and over again. And if you're sitting in here again, I keep addressing the parents of the young adults because I have so many people right now who are saying, like, this is a harder phase and no one's talking about it. You can invite some of those people who were important to your child, who you knew were great influencers, and say, like, hey, I know they're not here anymore, but keep them in mind. Call them up, send them a text. Don't forget about them. You matter to them, and I can't get them to do anything right now. So repeat that process over and over again. Now here's the thing. It's 1:35. We could kind of put a bow on this thing right now. You've heard who you are. You've heard that you're supposed to point them to Jesus. You're supposed to plant them and have their roots go towards the stream and not it be about you and your identity, not be in parenting and not feeling so urgent and taking a pause when you need one and knowing who you are. And we would risk the practicality being you resorting back into doing. Or potentially thinking that this is about resilience, about keeping your kid from doing something that's going to be a game over failure. But it's not about doing something, and it won't be that simple. You'll find yourself resorting back to the way you felt before you walked in here. Having heard that you're a helper and having heard all about the gospel, some of you might think, I still don't quite know what I'm supposed to do, or how do I point them to the gospel? Maybe that's unfamiliar territory for you. So I'm going to do something that I love to do and you might hate. I'm going to turn up the heat a little bit. I asked you at the beginning of this to think about where you're going. And we told you that you're a helper, that God's not helping you, that you're pointing them to Him. Where do you think God is going with this whole thing? What does He want? God is on a mission for your child's heart. And the reason why you matter so much and the thing that you're trying to help him with is to stand in the gap and be on that rescue mission with him. He's calling you into being on His team for your child. In the book of John, Jesus describes Himself to His disciples. He says, I am the good shepherd. This is the way in which I am going about calling people in to me and knowing who I am and being close to me. I am a good shepherd. I know my sheep and my sheep know me, and I laid down my life for the sheep. And that is the story of the gospel right there. God has laid down His life for our children, and it's our job to get them closer to Him so that they understand that. But also, in the book of John, He says, but in this world, you're going to have trouble. It's not going to be easy. You don't have to worry because I already overcame it, but you're going to have it. Now, you could think, it would be easy to think. Even I sometimes still ask, why did there have to be trouble? Why is there trouble if it's already overcome and you're God? Why is there trouble? Well, it's because we're not at the end of the story. We're in the middle of it. The rescue mission is still happening. The rescue mission that started back in the garden is still happening now. It started with sin, and you know your kids are sinners. They've been making sinful decisions all day while you've been here. They are sinners. And you're going home to that. And the reason why there is still sin is because there's an enemy. You have a villain working against you, and it's the same one that has been the whole time. And it could seem like a fictional story. I'm not trying to over-spiritualize this, but it's true. Satan is against you. In that same passage in John, Jesus says, but when He's talking about His sheep, the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that you may have life and have it to the full, but there is a thief. Have you ever watched a thief work? Recently, I had a thief, great place to pause, outside of my house, and I was walking through my house, and it was still dark out. I get up really early, and I was walking through my house, and I looked through the window, and there was a guy going through my car. I didn't make it real hard on him. I left it unlocked. But anyway, he's going through my car. And it was so creepy to me. I don't do that anymore, guys. Judgy. But it was so creepy to me. I looked through the window, and the thing that stood out to me later when I reflected on it was how quiet it was. It was so silent. When I got into the car later, it was destroyed. It only took a matter of seconds, though, what I watched. But it was just destroyed inside, and it was so quiet. So when Jesus is describing Satan as a thief, this is what he's talking about. A great thief is quiet. Now, if you need to have the validity of this established, a couple of the speakers today have mentioned the very, very hard truths around suicide. And I know we keep bringing that up, but guys, it's real. And I need you to know that it's real. Right now, the suicide rate from 2007 to today has increased by 57% in children ages 10. It used to be 12. 2 years ago, it was 12. 10 to 24. Now, if your heart is beating fast, it should. Last year, no, what year is it? Is it 2021? In 2020, there were 6,600 kids in that age group, 10 to 24, who successfully committed suicide, took their own life. Guys, when I was 10, I was running through the woods with a flashlight. The world has turned into such a hard place for our kids, and they're fighting so many battles that we don't understand, and it's because there's a thief. So what works against that? Well, we talked about it. It's those assets, it's those people, it's that team. Who's going to build that team? Who did I ask to build that team? You. You're the primary influence. This could start to sound like a pep rally where we're just building a team and we're just trying to win, and I know we got an enemy, and let me tell you a story that can help you understand where I'm coming from. When my son Brady was a week away from being a year old, we were visiting friends in Indiana. I don't remember much about this day because nothing really important happened during that day, but that night I'll never forget. He went to bed, and just before he went to bed, we learned that one of their kids of the house we were visiting had a cough. That was significant. Went to sleep. A few hours later, awakened by a sound I will never forget. Now, I've heard croup before. My older son had it a couple of times, and that alone is scary. But by the time I was awakened of this sound, it had gone to an acute level. I ran across the hall, pick him up. His chest is caving in. His hands and his fingers and his toes are blue. His face is quickly getting there, and he is fighting. I mean, he is trying. There is no time to call 911. I wrap him up in a blanket. We yell, turn on all the lights, wake up everybody in the house. Next thing you know, we're in the car. I'm in the back seat. There's no time for seat belts. I have him wrapped up, and I am rocking him. And our friend who knows the back way to the hospital is driving. I remember seeing the speedometer, 96 miles per hour to the hospital. And I'm saying to him, Brady, his name's Brady, it's going to be okay. But I wasn't sure. By the time we get to the hospital, he's not breathing anymore. We jump out of the car, run in, and I don't know how this happens because it never happens, but there was a medical staff right there waiting, and they took him from us, and they take him back to a room, and I remember seeing them. They're hooking him up to all these things, and he's so small. Somebody stabs him in the leg with a needle, and he starts throwing up. And then he cries. And it is the most beautiful cry I've ever heard, more beautiful than the first time that I heard it. Later, the doctors tell us that it was the most serious case that they'd ever seen turn out well. And in that moment, it was probably one of the first moments. That night was probably one of the first times that I really understood. I mean, I knew my kids needed me, but it was the first time I really understood how helpless it could feel to not be able to meet that need. How that feeling, that sense of urgency, I would have done anything. I would have awakened anyone. I would have awakened every house and called everyone to get me there. Wouldn't each one of you have done the same? If you've ever been in a situation like that, you know that you would. You would wake anyone. Now, if I'm telling you that God has you on a rescue mission for your child, and I am telling you that the most important thing that you can do, or the greatest strategy you could use to try to help your child know his or her worth and to understand what it is that God says about them and their identity in Christ, and you're the one building the team, Imagine a scenario where all of a sudden the world shuts down. Every kid is inside his or her own house. There's no teachers because they can't go to school. Sports, not a thing. Dojos closed down, no recitals. Can't go to church, there's no small group leaders or Sunday school teachers. It's just you. Sound familiar? Now, if I'm a thief, and I'm a good one, I leave you parenting, teaching, solving all the problems, ordering your groceries online, not knowing what's going to happen today or tomorrow. And you're exhausted, and you're depressed, and you're exasperated, and you don't know who to tell because you also are alone. If I'm a great thief, and I take you out, who's going to build the team? Now, I've given this talk before, and it's not always so dramatic. It's like, build a team. Yeah, we're going to build a team. And we leave, and we have a practical strategy, and we go, and we can do it. And I hear really good things. Because when you intentionally do this, there are people around who will get on your team. But today, let me tell you why this is different. Because in the last couple of weeks, the emails and the texts and the phone calls that I have had from other parents, from people who'd signed up today, but some who didn't, has been more about them feeling wrung out. And I would hate for you to leave here having heard really practical things and having gotten some tools and some strategies to help and still be just as tired as the moment you walked in here. Still be just as exasperated and desperate as the moment you came in here. When I told you that you were most important, I didn't mean just to me or just to your kid. I mean, you are important to God. He is the good shepherd of you. He is on a rescue mission for your heart. If he can capture your heart, then you will be far more likely to lead him into a healthy relationship, your kids into a healthy relationship with him. He's after you. For God so loved you. If you're in this room today and you came here and that's the message that you most needed to hear, there is no shame in that. That is just as much for your kid as anything you heard in a breakout session or as any book that you could read cover to cover. He's trying to capture your heart enough to get the help that you need. Now, if you don't normally go to this church, you should know that this is a place where these people who raised their hands and said that they bought formula, they would also rally around you for that. There's plenty of opportunities here, plenty of people that you can talk to. In fact, we built in extra time at the end of this. Don't leave without talking to somebody about you needing help. If that's what this is going to take, then take the oxygen mask for yourself first. If your greatest takeaway today is that it's okay for you to ask for help, then that's a win. I want to pray for you. Father God, thank you for how much you love us. Thank you for how much you love our kids. Thank you for loving our kids enough and for loving us enough to give us the opportunity to be a part of our kids' lives. But God, I pray for the parents in this room right now who walked in here and they were depleted. God, I pray that they would know that the source of their strength, that as the heat is just blaring down on them, God, that you want to refresh them, that you want to get them back to a place where they can thrive again, Lord. I pray that they would know that, because if they thrive and their kids thrive and their families thrive, then our communities thrive and our schools thrive. God, this is a rescue mission for the world, and it starts with each one of us. And so, God, I pray that these parents today, that they would feel captivated, that they would feel compelled, but that at the end of the day, they would feel more than anything loved by you. That you never ask any one of us to be perfect. You just ask us to follow after you with our whole hearts, and you will overcome all of our troubles because you've already done it all for us. What a blessing that is, and we thank you. I pray all these things in your precious name. Amen.